All right. So, welcome. This is the 2024 Application Prep Seminar. For those who have never met me, which may be a couple of you, my name is Joanne Snap. I have a doctorate. You do not need to call me Dr. Snap. That makes me really uncomfortable. But I have been a pre-health advisor for this is my ninth year, and have worked in both admissions and advising. Much of what I'm going to tell you is honestly a blend of both of those worlds. Working as a director of admissions gave me a lot of insight. It really formed the basis and the philosophy of how I advise, but I can't say that working as an actual advisor for 6 years hasn't also very much shaped the way that I do things. I am a data informed advisor. So what that means is I've always studied data. I've always studied my applicants, looked very closely at where people get in, who gets in, why people get in. After every season, I like to go back and look at personal statements, and look at like, okay, this statement got this person interviews at this school, and looking kind of at trends in that way to kind of understand what works and what doesn't work. Because not all med schools are the same and not all med schools want the same things. So that's how I have always operated. I think data informed decisions are honestly the only way to go about this. I don't know how you could do this without looking at data. And I want to share some of that data with you tonight. I know some of you have already seen that, but some of you have not. So we'll spend just a minute, and I like to use that to kind of frame my understanding of how things work. If you have any, sometimes people like to press back on kind of things I say. Well, I heard this, or I read this on Reddit, or I read my friend told me, and I don't mind at all if people want to push back on things I say and try to challenge. Well, this is what the status quo out in the universe says we should be doing. Why are you telling us the exact opposite? I'm okay with you doing that, but you're probably not going to change my philosophy at this point because I've been doing it for a long time and I have enough evidence that it works. But I'm happy to hear your thoughts, and I'm happy to even dispel some of those myths for you. So bring them. Nothing like that challenges me. I'm happy to justify everything that I'm about to tell you with evidence. So with that, let's kick it off. Actually, before I kick it off, does anybody have any questions for me about anything? Anything under the sun? Actually, before I kick it off, is there anybody here who is not pre-med? You can post in the chat if you don't mind. Everybody here is pre-med? Speak now or forever hold your peace, because I'm going to talk med school if you're all pre-meds. Okay, then we're going to have a lot of fun. You must be present to win. If you're not pre-med and you're watching this, sorry, I'm going to talk a lot. I mean, everything I say is very, very applicable to. Okay, so interested in PA. Well, everything I'm about to tell you is very applicable to all like medicine, PA, and dental. So honestly, I don't advise differently across those fields. I don't treat my pre-PA, my pre-meds any differently. And it works for both of them. So if you're pre-med and or pre-PA, everything I say works just the same. There's a few minor differences when it comes to timelines, but beyond that, it's not too different. Okay, here we go. So this is our plan for the next 10 weeks. We will meet every week, including next week, even though next week is a holiday. If you can't make it, then I will record everything like I'm doing and send it out usually the next morning. If you have questions about anything that I talked about, on Tuesday nights at the same time, I host a free applicant support group, which is open to anybody. So if you want to ask more questions that you don't get in during our sessions, just come to the Tuesday night session and you can ask all the questions you want. We can carry conversations over to that space as well. I want to start by kind of just talking big picture about what we are all about to experience together. We are going to spend the next year and a half together. I have February as the end, but by no means is February the end of the application season. I am working with people all the way until the day they get their white coats, and they're sending me their white coat pictures. So the application process is a year and a half or a year and 7 months. And a lot is going to happen, and we are going to be on a roller coaster of emotions for the next year and a half. So I have an idea of what to expect. Some of you may have an idea, but most of you have no idea what you're about to go through. You may be a little nervous, you may be a little afraid, hopefully you're a little excited, but I'm going to tell you each step of the way as we work together over the next year and a half what you're about to experience, and you'll understand once we get into that. So if you're going to work with me the entire time, a lot of what I do is also prep you for what's about to happen, and some of the emotions that come with that process. So right now it's all just like excitement and yay, we're starting our personal statements. So right now everybody should have a personal statement. We should be in the works. And if you haven't started drafting your personal statement with me, that's okay. It's January still. That's what we need to be doing. By the end of January, I want everyone to have a solid draft of a personal statement working on it. We're going to work on your personal statement for as long as it takes until it's perfect. By February, at least, we are going to start integrating your experience descriptions into your writing. So you should be touching your personal statement, 2 or 3 times a week at least, but we should be looking at it once a week at least, or I should be looking at it like once a week or every other week. Experience writing will integrate in as soon as your personal statement is up and running. And then by March, and you can actually ask for your letters anytime, but by March at the latest, I want you all to have contacted your letter writers. So we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, in week 4 or 5, to give you a really good understanding, if you haven't done that already, of what the request should look like, what your letter packet should look like, all of that. And then around March, I'm going to start talking to you all about Casper and Preview, which are the two situational judgment tests that you're going to take. I will do a session in this class on how to prep for those 2 tests. And then if you need additional prep individually, I definitely can do that in one of your sessions. But we'll talk all about that. You're going to take that test in either April or May. If you can't do it until June, that's perfectly okay, but I'd really like for you to get it over with in April or May. If you're PA, the app opens in April. If you're pre-med, the app opens in May. If you're pre-dental, the app opens in May too. In May, we are done with your writing, hopefully. We are done with all of the parts of the application. And all we're doing in May is we are filling out the application. You're sending all of your transcripts, and I will warn you ahead of time when you need to start researching that. And we're doing nothing but basically answering a lot of logistical questions. That's kind of all May is. Once your app is done, then I start doing read throughs, and that means I'm going to read your entire app from beginning to end, as a PDF, and we do that together. And that can happen anytime in May. And also people who are doing MD and DO applications, we also have to fill out a COMIS, or if you're doing the Texas application, we have to do TMDSS. So depending on how many apps you're doing, May is a busy month with a lot of filling things out. So you're going to submit either the end of May or beginning of June. Either one is okay. I'd like it to be done by the second week of June if possible. And then it takes usually 2 to 3 weeks to get verified. So verification is simply the application system, AMCAS, let's say, cross-checking your transcript grades against the grades that you entered in your application. So when you enter your grades in your application, you're going to enter them exactly as they appear on your transcripts, and all AMCAS is doing is making sure that you did that well. If you mess up and you don't copy them exactly as they appear, they'll send your app back to you and you have to fix it, which we don't want to happen. So that's all verification is. Verification is not checking your test scores. It's not checking your letters of rec. You can submit your app without test scores. You can submit your app without letters of rec. It has nothing to do with verification. So as soon as your app is filled out and your classes are entered, you can submit even if you're still waiting for letters of rec. You don't need your letters of rec by May because you can submit without them. It takes an entire month for verification to happen because the schools don't actually get your applications until July, or like the end of June, June 29th, June 30th. Every year it's a different date, but it's always the very end of June. But they're not sitting there. Med schools are not sitting there on the edge of their seats on July 1st waiting for your applications, I promise you, because they are still finishing up the previous cycle. So they are finishing up, they're finishing up accepting, they're planning their orientation, and they're getting ready to start their next class. So they're not, just like dying to read your app the very first week of July. I think everyone has this idea in their head that, because they've been waiting all month, that as soon as July hits, the med schools are just going to start blasting them with information and secondaries. And to some degree, you do get automatic secondaries. Like you are going to get secondaries in July, like the first week or two. But there are going to be schools that move a little slower. I saw that a lot this year where secondaries didn't come immediately. They didn't come until the third or fourth week of July. So everyone is typically in this like mad rush rat race to like get it done as fast as possible. And oh my gosh, I haven't got my secondary. What does that mean? And da, da, da. It's a huge frenzy. And I'm really going to encourage you just to take a deep breath and calm down because it's everyone in the same boat. Everyone's getting their secondaries, slow. Everyone's submitting them in the same kind of pace. Some people do it super fast and write terribly. Not you guys. You may do it a little slower, but you're going to write really good writing. And we can actually pre-write your secondaries depending on how fast you get your application done. So if we move quickly and we get everything done early, we can pre-write as early as April or May and have most of that done before July. But if you're normal and you're like a lot of people and you procrastinate, then we'll start secondaries in July or June, and we will work on them through August. I really like to be wrapped up by September 1st. I will put tons of pressure on you to be done by September 1st because by December 1st, I'm going to be so burned out with secondaries. Each of you, if you apply to 30 schools, you're going to write about 50 pages of writing. And I have about 50 applicants, so you can do the math on how many pages of writing I'm going to read. It's a lot. So by the end of the summer, we are all burned out and we all need a break. So I want you all to get done so we can take a deep breath before interview season starts. Interview season tends to start in August for my applicants, and it goes all the way through June. I have people who were invited last year in July, so there's that. So super quick, any questions about the timeline? I know I just flew through that, but I wanted to just show you what this next year is going to look like.
For letters of recommendation, does it matter how early those are sent in or the date of submission or the date that's on
Nope.
it? Okay, sounds good.
If you're using Interfolio and it was like, let's say last in the fall or whatever, that's fine. As long as it's not 2 years old, if it's within a year, year and a half, you're fine. Is that
Okay.
what you're worried about?
I think I had it last spring. I used Mapped, the MyLORs thing, and then I had them submit on there.
Okay.
But yeah, the date was I think March 2023.
That should be fine. They may
So
assume you're a reapplicant, but it's not the end of the world.
sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. If you use LOR from a previous cycle, do you need to get them re-verified? Does Interfolio check them if it is written for another cycle? If they're in Interfolio, my understanding is that you can just reconnect them to the application. I, when you say re-verified, do you mean re-verified by Interfolio? Or do you mean like does Interfolio checking them for the signing and the letterhead? If that's what you mean, once they're checked, and you should be able to reuse them. I will say if you're reusing someone's letters, though, you need to let them know you're reusing them. You should always give someone the courtesy to give you that option to opt in or out. Most people don't care, but you should always tell them. I think that's what you mean. There's no verification of letters on the med school side or on the application side, so the application system doesn't care which letters you use or when they're from or anything like that. Any other questions? Okay, let me know if that doesn't answer your question. I'm happy to, we can dive a little deeper. Okay, and I have a wacky mouse, so it doesn't work half the time. It keeps going ahead. Here is the question of the day, the year, our lifetime. What is the secret to getting in? I've been asked this question for years, and this is what everybody wants to know. Like, this is why you're here, right? You want to be successful. And it's kind of a running joke because when I used to work at UC Davis, I actually had students buy me a Magic 8 Ball. I kept it on my desk as a joke because people would ask me this so often, like, what do you think my chances are of getting in? That's what everyone asks. What are my chances? And if I'm in a really sarcastic mood, I'll tell you like 67%. You have a 67% chance of getting in. I have no idea what your chances are. All I know is that most of the applicants I work with get in. Now, not to I have to think there's some, correlation there between the way we do things and them getting in. But honestly, I cannot predict how this is going to go for you. I don't think anybody could. If anybody had the secret formula, they would be extremely wealthy. But even, I don't believe in like Lysium scores. I don't believe in any of that nonsense. I think that there is some strategy that you can use that increases your chances of getting in. But at the end of the day, it's very hard to control for which schools accept you. It's hard to control for a lot of things. We kind of put a lot of we put a lot of applications out there. We use strategy that I've found that works. And then we kind of have to keep an open mind and be open to the possibility that well, we don't know where you're going to get in, but you have to be happy going anywhere you get in. So when we talk about school list, that's something that's really important because you may get one acceptance. And if you get one acceptance and it happens to be at a school that you did not want to go to, that is a horrible conversation I hate having. I do not want to hear anybody tell me after all of this, you got into a med school and you don't want to go and you want to reapply. I hate that conversation. I get really irritated. So I don't want to have that. So we're not going to pick any schools on our list that we are not happy to go to. So the secret to getting in is part of that strategy is picking the right schools. And when you pick the right schools and you're excited about the schools you're applying to, that shows and that actually helps you get in. So it's all kind of a cyclical process. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I learned when I worked at the med school. So when I was the director of admissions. I used to train the admissions committee. So I went through the AAMC holistic review training. The AAMC people came to our school and I was one of the people who was trained, which then means I could go on and train other people. So I would stand in front of a room of like 100 physicians and try to teach them how to screen applicants and how to interview holistically. That was fun. Um, this was the chart that we used back then. This is what the holistic review chart meant. If you ever hear anybody talk about the EAM model, this is it. And this is basically what holistic review talks about. So in the center, we have the metrics, your scores, your GPA, and then you see grade trends. So grade trends, your upward trend in your grades, is equally as important as your GPA. See, they're all equal. People often obsess over the GPA, but forget that the upward trend is just as important. And then you look at the outer ring. This is the ring where most people get a little confused. So med schools, the number one goal of, I would argue, of most med schools is to create a class that consists of people from many, many different backgrounds. And when we talk about backgrounds, we mean lots of different things because every med school wants to create a class that is diverse. That is, I promise you, everybody's goal. Of course, they can also balance this with academic achievements, which is at the center, right? That's the center of everything. But once you've proven you can do it, which the bar is relatively low on that, then they look at the middle ring. Is there anything on this middle ring that surprises you? Now, they're not looking for these things, they're looking at these things. They're looking at these things and they're saying, what can this person do for us? What can this person do for the field of medicine? Is there anything on here that I guess surprises you? Or you're not sure why they would look at that? I didn't make this up. This is what they use. So
Citizenship.
citizenship. Well, there are a lot of undocumented people living in America who struggle to access healthcare. So if somebody is applying and they happen to be either DACA or undocumented folks do have a harder time getting into med school. But if you have DACA, that would actually be really valuable to them because you have a perspective on how to serve communities that may struggle to access healthcare because of their visa status. So it's a perspective that you bring. Now,
Gotcha. I was thinking international, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, there are international applicants as well that bring value. International applicants have a much harder time getting into med school. And there are med schools that don't accept international students, and there are med schools that don't accept DACA, unfortunately. So that's part of the reality. But looking at your citizenship, your visa status is part of the process. Yeah. Is there anything else on here that you're like, why would they care about that? Physical ability? Yeah. So there are, when you get accepted, you actually sign this agreement, and it says a lot of things in the agreement, so read it. One of some of the fine print in that agreement is that you have the physical ability to do the job. Um, and so that's part of it is they're looking at they're also some schools are really focused on accepting more people with different physical abilities. So if you happen to have a physical disability, that's not a negative thing. As long as you can do the job and they can make reasonable accommodations for you, then that's not really a problem. But they are looking at that.
Relationship status also stood out to me.
They love married people. I'm just being honest. So if you're married or you're about to get married, um, kudos to you. It's a good thing. Maturity. That surprises you that they're looking at maturity? So maturity is obviously a very important thing when it comes to becoming a physician. Family status, so that'd be whether you have children or not. They also like people who have children. Is being married but applying to different geographic areas as your partner. No. So if you're applying as a partner, you know, I already know this for this person, but you would want to let me know that right up front because it's important if we're applying as a couple, even if your partner is not applying to med schools. Let's say your partner's applying to law school in the particular area and you want to stay together. Med schools are actually really friendly towards that, and as long as you are a significant partner, in my experience, I've seen that work out pretty well for people. But it you can't just be your boyfriend. It really helps a lot if you're a part like a fiance or married. Um, I'm not sure. Yeah. So the removal of race and ethnicity that happened last year, right? They passed a law that you can't do race-based admissions anymore. But I'm not super worried about that because med schools have all kinds of ways of doing whatever they want. So they will continue to accept whoever they want for whatever reason they want. That's what the whole holistic review means. The holistic review is a legal protection that allows the med schools to accept whoever they want for any reason they want. So they can say, okay, I'm going to pick this person regardless of their MCAT and GPA because they bring X, Y, and Z to our school out of this middle ring or out of the outer ring. The outer ring are the experiences that you've done. And those are also important, but not as important as the middle ring, the attributes. So who you are as a person is is just as important or more important than the things you've done. Notice the one right above metrics says fields of interest. I love when people tell me, "Oh, you're not supposed to know what you want to do already." Well, why do they care about? Why do so many schools ask you what you want to do then? And why do so many schools have tracks that are basically pipelining people into certain fields? So a lot of the information you maybe have been told elsewhere is not based in reality in terms of how admissions people look at look at you. Having goals, like having somewhat, you don't have to know, like no one wants you to say, I want to be a neurosurgeon. But if you have an idea of what you want to do, generally, like I want to go into academic medicine, I want to go into research, I want to go into public health in medicine, I want to do urban underserved, I want to serve immigrant communities, whatever it is, like if you have a really good idea of what you want, you're going to more likely to be successful on your path because once you get into med school, you'll be able to really hone in on those interests and start gaining experiences in that area early on, which will help you be more competitive for residency. And they know that. So if you know what you want to do before you enter, that makes you seem as though you have done your research and you know why you want to go into medicine and they know you'll be more successful on the path long term. So there's no harm in knowing what you want. And if you're working with me, I'm going to push you to know what you want and say that out loud. Again, not saying you want to be a surgeon, but just saying generally what you want out of your career. Any other thoughts on this?
Is faith only important for faith-based schools, or do
No, 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 no. Everybody likes
those
faith.
populations?
Yeah, so people also have told me over the years, oh, you're not supposed to talk about religion in your application. A lot of my applicants talk about religion. So if you are Muslim or you're Hindu or you're Sikh or you're any of the religions, you bring value to the field of medicine because obviously there are patients who also share those religions. And so you will be able to provide more appropriate care to them because you understand how faith intersects with healthcare or health. I've had a lot of people who come from really Christian backgrounds who've told me stories about how, like, they've had family members who refuse medical care because they're just going to rely on, faith and God. They're going to pray their cancer away. And that really impacted the way that they know how to interact with future patients who share that same belief. So having faith as, part of your background usually will help you work with patients better who share that background, or just having a understanding of other people's faiths. So that's part of the cultural awareness part that we're about to talk about. Anything else in here that surprised you?
How careful do you need to be about languages spoken? Because I've heard like sometimes in the interview they make you like they test you sometimes. I don't know. I've just heard.
Well, you don't want to you don't want to overindulge in that. If you don't speak the language, don't say you speak it. Just say, in the application you can actually indicate the level of competency in the language. So if you only speak it a little, just put a little, right? Don't claim to be proficient. But yeah, if you put you're proficient in Spanish, they definitely could they call you out on that. So here's a true story. One of my staff members when I worked at the university, um, he got a call from a California med school that basically the dean called him and said, I really like your application, but do you speak Spanish? And he said, no, but I'm willing to learn it in the next however many months. So he scrambled to learn Spanish just so he can, speak it to her when he went to his interview. And she called him back and tested him to see if he spoke Spanish. And it was a whole thing. He ended up not even getting into the school. He ended up getting into a different good school. But the fact that the dean cared that much about him speaking the language said a lot to me. And so that is a thing. Not to scare everybody who doesn't speak Spanish. It's just if you do speak languages, that's something you do want to put front and center in your application. Someone said, what if the readers of your app have unconscious bias and discriminate against you based on your faith? I suppose that is a thing that could happen anywhere for anybody at any time. If you are that afraid of being discriminated against at a particular school, then don't talk about your faith. Um, it's not something I've ever been afraid of. So I don't worry about it. Like, I always have had my applicants talk about their faith and they have always gotten into med school somewhere. If you think that could be possible, then you just have to decide for yourself that you're not going to take the risk. I can't do anything about I can't control who reads your application, and I can't promise you they don't have unconscious bias. You apply to 30 schools, and most people would be happy with 5 interviews. That's the number I want you all to have. So if you get 5 interviews, I'm happy. That means 25 schools didn't like you. 25 people said no to you. That's why we apply to so many schools, right? So I can't control the people who don't like you. I only need 5 of them to like you. That makes sense? I try not to worry about making everybody happy because you cannot make everybody happy. Okay, so this was old school. This is what I still believe this is deeply ingrained in the process because this is what holistic review actually means. However, just a few years ago, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, I lost track. Schools moved to a new way of measuring things. Now they use these things called competencies. And because this is so subjective, this thing here, and they can literally pick anybody for any good old reason, this is a little bit more measurable. So they probably got a lot of pushback from people about the holistic review. And so they said, okay, fine, we're not doing holistic review, even though we are. We are going to use these competencies to pick people. And so they came up with a list of competencies and they said this, we're looking for these things in our applicants. So I always find it really funny when people ask me, what are med schools looking for? There's literally a list of things med schools are looking for on the internet. If you Google AAMC core competencies, you will find all of the competencies that med schools are measuring in your application. I started adopting a competency-based approach to writing applications a few years ago, and instead of this is the entire focus of our application is how do we showcase these competencies to the med schools through the various parts. So we're going to play a little game. I'm not going to give you 30 seconds. That's way too long. I'm going to give you like 10 seconds. I want you to write down as many competencies that you know or that you think would be on this list. So in the chat, just start writing down some things that you think med schools would be measuring in you. Okay, clearly some people have the list in front of them. I'm not even judging you. That was very efficient to copy the list. Yep. Actually, I made a post about this, right? So you all should have already read this. If you read my blog. Yep. Okay, so you all have a good idea. There used to be 15, and I loved that. It just rolled off the tongue so nicely. Now there's 17 core competencies, and I think it's hilarious because everything about the med school process just continues to grow. They keep adding tests, they keep adding competencies. It's like, what else can you possibly add to this? That's okay though. The ones they added are okay. So, the new ones are cultural humility, empathy, and interpersonal skills. That's 3. Maybe interpersonal skills was there, but name something else. So cultural humility is honestly like I laugh internally about why they added this. It's almost like they could hear me because I have been talking about cultural humility for years. There was a big push where I worked. Actually, cultural humility was started by a nurse at the UC Davis School of Nursing. And the whole idea of cultural humility is that rather than cultural competence, which is a going about it like I know a lot of things about culture, you instead go about it as I don't know a lot of things about your culture. Can you please teach me those things? And so in most cases, you all don't know everything about most people. And it's much better to go about your thinking in terms of like, what do I need to learn in order to do this better? So I love that they added that, although my applicants have already been doing this for years. And then I always laugh about empathy because everyone always says for years, everyone thought empathy was one of them. And empathy and compassion just got added to this. They never measured that apparently before, so now they are. Everybody typically shows empathy in one way or another. We're not going to literally use the word empathy for the most part. Like we're not going to declare I have empathy. We're going to show empathy through your behaviors. We're going to see what empathy looks like. That's how we're going to use that one. But are there any here? And they changed one of them. My favorite. Who wrote it? Oopsie. My mouse is acting crazy. Who wrote capacity for improvement? One of you did that. Joseph. So that was my favorite before, and they changed it. So now they're calling it commitment to learning, which doesn't have the same ring to it. But basically, capacity for improvement used to mean that you were capable of learning. Now they're saying, are you committed to learning? I think for pre-meds, the capacity for improvement was much more relevant. But yeah, any questions about any of these? There is a very detailed list of these on the website. They have a PDF that you can print out. It has descriptions. I would like all of you to print that document and hang it on your wall and study it, because I will randomly ask you which competency whatever paragraph is showing, and you should off the top of your head know which competency it's showing. When we're doing your experience descriptions, I'm going to ask you which competencies are we intentionally highlighting, and you need to be aware. We're gonna link everything back to competencies in one way or another. Now, I say everything, I'm not being literal. Like, there are probably going to be a couple paragraphs in your experiences that maybe we don't. But for the most part, we're being very intentional in your writing. We're being very intentional with what we're showing everybody. Because if you don't, then you're just randomly putting things in your application, hoping that it makes sense to people. All of these sections, starting with your biographic information section, which in my opinion is one of the most important sections, um, shows all of these things about you. So in your biographic info section, when we go through this in the application week, when we're actually going through an application together, you're going to see that your all of your background information is in there. What your parents do for a living, whether you worked during undergrad, how much you contributed to your college, your academic, if you had an institutional action, if you have a impactful experience, all of that stuff that is kind of where you're coming from is in the biographic section. And a lot of that stuff, your language is spoken, all of that is going to start to create an impression in their mind of who you are. Before you say a word, they're going to read all these facts about you and start to form an impression of who you are. And so that already they can start to draw and make connections between some of your lived, like the let's say you qualify for fee assistance. If you qualify for fee assistance, you more than likely come from a lower income background. We can see that through your parents' occupation. We can see that through how you got your college paid for. Now they're starting to put things together, right? So they say, okay, this person comes from a low income background. So then we look at your grades and like, okay, well, the first year was a little rocky, then it got better, then it got better. Now, what competency are they drawing about you from that experience, your academic narrative?
Is part of it commitment to learning?
Possibly, but if let's say you struggled at the beginning and you got better at the end.
Resilience and adaptability.
Resilience and adaptability. So they can draw that conclusion based on your story. um Knowing that you came from a low income background means that they can draw conclusions, right? They can say, okay, this person might be a first gen student. They can see the fact that you're a first gen student by looking at your parents' education level. So knowing you're a first gen student, you go into college, they may expect that you have some challenges at the beginning, but you bounce back and you get better. So all of these things, these little biographic information facts start to paint pictures for them of like, okay, this is where this person is coming from. Now they have some idea about you. May not be correct all the way, but they have some idea. Now, as they get into your writing, they start to hear your voice. They start to paint a fuller picture of your personality and who you are. So you want to make sense to them. I'll give you an example of a time where I caught someone who didn't make sense. He was in his biographic information section painting a picture that he came from a low income background. He was putting all these details in there that would suggest that his family had no money. And then we got to the personal statement, and one of the first things he wrote about was how every year his family took a trip to India and donated items to people who were poor there. I said, hold on, hold on, hold on. Now, I grew up in a single parent household. I ate at food kitchens when I was a kid. We were dirt poor. We were not taking international trips anywhere. Like we were the only place I ever went was maybe 4 hours away from my home until I was older, but we were not taking trips. We didn't go on vacations. I said, that doesn't make any sense. How are you claiming that you were low income in your info section and then saying you're going on multiple trips throughout your life? And turns out he actually wasn't as low income as he was trying to make it seem. He just was trying to play some cards. So you can't do that. Like, you have to make sense in your application. I would encourage you to be honest. That's probably better. But in this case, it was glaringly, not going to work the way that he was doing it. So that, having people read your app obviously will catch inconsistencies like that. But that's an example of like how you have to, everything has to be sort of connected. Any questions so far about anything I'm saying? Okay, let's talk about personal statement then. Since you're all pre-med, both the MD and DO applicate personal statement is the same, which is wonderful. That changed. 5,300 characters. Characters are currency. So every character you use in your personal statement is valuable. Every word we use, every sentence we write, everything has a place in that. And we are going to choose our words carefully. We're going to choose our phrases very carefully. Because you have to say a lot of things in a page and a quarter. That is not a lot of writing to get a big message across. So this is going to be very crafty writing. There isn't any other genre that I'm aware of that does this, where you're both showing and telling, and a creative nonfiction piece that is centered around a career. So it's pretty cool if you think about it from a writing perspective, but not easy to do on your own. So what people applying to med school have traditionally thought the personal statement does is tell a story about your journey. And I call this your journey story. And if you're trying to write a journey story, I'm going to catch you and stop you and say, let's not do that. So a journey story is like where you walk me through your whole process of getting to where you are today. You start with the moment in time. I call that your origin story, where you first discovered you want to be a doctor. And then you say, okay, I discovered I want to be a doctor from this really impactful moment. So then I went and I did this, and then I went and I did this, and then I went and I did this. And each thing I did reaffirmed my desire to become a doctor. So you're literally just telling me over and over and over that I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. Hey, guess what? I want to be a doctor. And all these things proved it to me. So all I learned from you is that you want to be a doctor. But the thing is you applied to med school. You spent $3,000. You took OChem. You took the MCAT. Like, nobody doubts that you want to be a doctor. They're not here to find out whether you want to be a doctor or not. You applied to med school. So the assumption is that you want to be a doctor. The question is, why should they pick you? They have 6,000 applications. They have to pick a handful of people. Why are they going to pick you? Are they going to pick you because you discovered that you want to be a doctor? How is that helpful to them? What does that do for them? So if they're going to create a class of 100 people, they're going to put people in that class that can do something. They're going to change the school. They're going to change medicine. They're going to change the world. They're going to contribute in some meaningful way to solving some problem. They have ideas. They have solutions. They think, they're not scared to say what they think. I hear all the time people say, oh, I was told I shouldn't say, anything about what I think should be done, or I shouldn't criticize medicine because who am I? Well, you're applying to a doctoral level education. When I got my doctorate, and even when I got my master's degrees, they made me say what I wanted to do with my career. So in order to be accepted into my doctoral degree, I had to write an essay about what I was planning to do with my life that warranted getting the degree. They were letting me into the program based on the idea that I had some plans or some goals with my life. And then the idea was I'm supposed to tell them how this degree is going to help me get to that point. And so it's a little bit like that, except you have an idea of what you want to do. Now you want to show them that you can bring some value to them. So if you picture a table and there's 8 people around this table, each person around that table, imagine it's at a med school, and you're talking about medicine, you're talking about clinical cases, and there's only 8 people around that table. Every person at that table should contribute some perspective to that table that's needed in our society. So they're going to have people from all different backgrounds sitting at that table. They're going to have men and women. They're going to have non-binary genders. They're going to have people of all religions, all races. They're going to have people who are older and younger. People who, they don't want all biology majors at that table. They're going to have people who are from humanities and sciences. So they're going to create this class around this table that can contribute something different to the conversation. And that includes career goals. So they don't want an entire class full of people who want to go into academic medicine. They're going to have people who want to go into public health, and people who want to do community health, people who want to go into technology and computer science. Like, all these people are going to add these perspectives that are so necessary to moving medicine forward. So if you don't show them what perspective you bring, if you don't show them what you want to do, then you're basically failing to show them why they should pick you. If all you focus on is, the fact that you did, puzzles as a kid, or you love building Legos, and, you want to help solve problems in the future. I'm not trying to be mean, but like the number of times over the last 9 years that I've read people talking about puzzles, Legos, running down a field and hearing their legs snap on the soccer field, and then meeting an orthopedic surgeon and realizing that's what they want to do. I mean, the number of times I've read these things, it's unreal. And it's not to say that those experiences weren't important to those people. It's just I'm only one person and I've read it so many times, so I can only imagine how many times like an older person who's been doing this for decades has read those things. So we really want to try not to um focus our most of our story on the origin and then just walk us through that, because it doesn't bring any value to the reader in terms of like, okay, now I know what made you want to be a doctor, but why should I pick you? So if you're focusing on helping people, that's the baseline. You should help people, and we should show stories of you helping people, but that's not why you want to be a doctor. Um, you should love science, and your grades will show that you love science. Hopefully you did well enough in some science classes. That's where that love of science comes through. And you should see a doctor. You should have seen a doctor do something. Hopefully it was good, but sometimes we see doctors do bad things, and it's okay if you did. We just have to be careful about how we talk about it, but that's okay. But that alone is not why you want to be a doctor. That's just that you saw one and now you have some idea. Maybe that person inspired the way in which you want to practice medicine. And I really don't want anyone to say that they don't want anyone else to suffer. I've heard that a lot where, oh, my grandma was dying. I saw how much she was suffering, and I don't want anyone to suffer like that. You are never going to end world suffering. You're not going to end suffering as a physician. People will suffer, people will die, you're not going to stop that. So saying those kinds of things just makes you sound like you're out of touch with reality and the limitations of medicine. Instead, maybe while people suffer, maybe you have a way that you want to approach that. Maybe you want to treat people with compassion. Maybe you want to reduce suffering in some very specific way. So the new concept that we're going to focus on is, what is the value that you bring to medicine? That's the question we're answering. And that's what I'm looking for, because this will show why you want to be a doctor at the same time, I promise you. And I'm going to show you some examples that prove that. So this is what a general personal statement looks like. A lot of times the 5-paragraph essay actually dwindles down to 4 paragraphs, because the paragraphs are so short that most people can't get in and out of their stories with such little space. So we end up usually getting rid of 1 paragraph and just going with a 4-paragraph essay with 2 strong stories. If you're someone who can tell good stories quickly, then we can keep the 5 paragraphs. It all just depends on how wordy you are. But we're going to start with a big story. I like the story to be on the ground. In a moment in time, you're sitting at a kitchen table, you're cooking with your grandma, you're doing something very, very specific. I love the story to start with a personal, like you're either with a family, like you're doing something with your family, it's personal, or if your family doesn't really have much to offer in terms of interesting things, then we can start in a clinical space. That's fine too. But we're literally going to be in a very very detailed moment in time. With each sentence in your intro, we're taking a step back. So the first sentence is going to be really elusive. Like, we don't know exactly what's going on. And then we take a step back. What's going on? It involves you. You're realizing something. You take one more step back. You're giving me an idea of what you're doing. So as an EMT, this, and this. Then you take one more step back. Where are you at, and how does this relate to your future? And then the last sentence is like, how does this thing lead to what you want to do in your future? And then every paragraph after that takes your thesis, what you want to do in your future, and unpacks it a little bit. So if we say, oh, I want to be a physician who increases access by providing culturally appropriate care, we would say, well, what does culturally appropriate care look like? Maybe you tell a story about a time you translated and increased access through reducing language barriers. Maybe you told a story about a time when you adapted a food recommendation to someone's culture. So you just take aspects of what you say you want to do and you show how you did that in the past. And then at the end of those stories, we tie it back to how you want to do it in your future. And then your conclusion, we're going to start with Kind of like your thesis again, we're going to integrate who you are with what you want to do and make a really powerful statement about why they should pick you. And then we're going to kind of take a step back, look at the takeaways from your paragraphs, summarize those in a sentence or two. And then we're going to end with a really basic sentence of like, so this is, this is what I want to do. And I'm excited about the future, or you can say it in a lot of different ways. But just kind of close it out with a very basic sentence. Your conclusion is the least important paragraph because if so nobody is legally obligated to read your entire personal statement. They don't have to read it at all if they don't want. If someone is tired of you, they are annoyed by you, they don't like you, you're posing red flags, whatever thing. If they want to stop reading, they will stop reading at any point and close your app and just say no. So if someone actually reads your entire essay and gets to your conclusion, then they already like you. No one's reading your conclusion unless they like you. If they already like you, there's very little you're going to say in your conclusion that's going to totally screw that up, right? Like they're not going to be like, oh my God, I love this person so much. Oh, wait, they said this one word wrong in the conclusion. I'm done. I don't like them. So we're going to be careful in your conclusion, but it's not the most, you don't want to save the most important thing you want to say for your conclusion. By that time, they already made the decision. They like you, they're zoning out, they're ready to move on to the next thing. So you want to say the most important things at the top and keep them engaged so that they'll just say yes by the time they get to your third paragraph. Does that make sense to everybody? And I know I'm talking extremely fast because this hour flew by. I will go through this more later if you need me to. I'm going to talk about creating a theme in your app where some of this comes out again. Okay, so our goals are to do these things, and you should have this recorded. This last bullet, I just want to stress to you that a lot of people say we want to show, don't tell. And I am totally trashing that. We are showing and telling. We show through our stories and then we tell them what we want them to know. If you hope that your reader takes something away from your story and you're just hoping that, that's a lot of hope. I think that for most of your readers, they're going to be busy and tired. Some of them may have just gotten off a very long shift at work. They're volunteering for the admissions committee, so they're not obligated to sit there and, read your app for 10 or 15 minutes. They're going to read it very quickly. So you have to make sure they get what you want them to know. So we're going to tell them. I'm going to let you read that on your own. These are some common questions that people typically ask me about personal statements. So you do not have to write two different personal statements. What we usually do is just take the MD personal statement and just tweak it a little bit for DO, as in like we change medicine to osteopathic medicine or osteopathic physician. But for the most part, the two work perfectly fine. I don't think I changed anybody's last year. Everyone used the exact same one and it was fine. They got both interviews. When should my personal statement be done? That depends entirely on your ability to write well and quickly. I wouldn't put so much pressure on yourself to get it done fast. I know everybody wants to get it done fast, but writing is a process. It's like research. You can try your best to do research really fast, but it doesn't usually work that way. Sometimes we discover things, sometimes we derail, sometimes we realize things last minute that there's better ideas. Sometimes we try working an idea for so long and it's just not working and we have to abandon it. So you need to be a little open-minded and flexible with the writing process. I've been a writer for a really long time. I have a bachelor's and a master's in English. So I've written more papers, plus my doctoral degree. Every single class I took was a minimum 15-page paper. So writing is kind of my thing. I'm telling you, it's not usually that linear and that smooth. It usually takes a lot of revisions. So you should be spending, I would say, at least an hour a week on your personal statement at this point. If you want it done faster, then you'll work on it more. But I would say you're going to spend half an hour with me working on it, so at least 1 hour outside of that time working on it, revising it. I really don't want you to work with other people on your personal statement until I tell you you're ready to do that. If you have multiple people reading your personal statement and giving you feedback while I'm also doing it, you're creating a lot of chaos for yourself because I promise you there are going to be people who disagree with me. And what's going to happen is you're going to get really confused and you're going to start second guessing everything, and then you're going to start trying to make everybody happy, and sometimes it'll sound like the way I want it, and sometimes it'll sound like the way they want it, and at the end of the day, you're gonna lose your voice, and you're gonna lose what it is you were actually trying to do, and I've seen this happen to a few people. Their personal statements turn into absolute garbage because it's just like so many people were involved in the creation of it that it ends up not being about the person at all. And it causes that person so much stress trying to figure out who's right. So I would say if you trust me, then trust what I'm telling you about your personal statement. And if you don't trust me, that's fine, but don't then let someone else help you. Like I don't need to help you if you don't trust me, right? When we're done and I say it's good, then I will ask you to go get two people's opinions on it, but I will give you very specific feedback to seek. I don't want you just to go say, hey, here are 10 people, read my statement and trash it for me, because that's not really helpful to you. But we'll talk more about that later. Are there any other questions that you all have at this point about your personal statement? Okay, let's look at some samples then. Um, okay. I could probably show you 20 examples of people's writing, and you're gonna find that it's almost the same in every single person. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah, I can't see you anymore, so there we go.
Do
Okay.
you mind changing the zoom?
Hmm?
Do you mind changing the zoom in like the top left corner? So
Oh yeah, Zoom. Sorry. I was thinking the Zoom. There we go.
thanks.
Okay. So what we have here is a story and a moment in time and our thesis. So I want you to take a minute and I want you to read this intro. Okay. Thoughts on the intro? Is there anything here that you were like, wow, I did not know we could talk about that?
I like how they started with, painting a picture and then they actually brought in our current healthcare situations and like a specific adolescent population.
Yeah, so this is a very specific moment in time. What really struck me about this is the doctor sitting on the floor building trust with a patient, with a little boy. And then this is the way in which she wants to practice medicine. So look at the thesis. This is her why. This is why she wants to wake up every day and go do this job. Um, all right, we're gonna look at okay, a little bit different. So read this intro. I'm going to come back and I want to talk about the difference between the first one and the second one in just a second. But I want you to read a third one really quick. Any thoughts on this one?
I personally like the third one a lot better than the first and second. I think it was a perfectly good balance between like details and storytelling, but also a lot of good reflection. Like I know exactly he or she like what they're trying to get me to understand about each paragraph. And so I really like that about this one.
Excellent. I like this one a lot too because it's about her. It's showing her, and it's very deep about like what she's thinking and feeling. It's showing her brain and how her brain operates, which I love. I love when they can see how you are thinking about things because at the end of the day, you're going to get accepted for what exists inside your brain, not just a checklist of things you've accomplished, but how you see the world. So the more we can get inside your brain and show how you want to do this, and then tell, right? As a physician, I hope to practice humanistic medicine while attempting to rebuild trust in vulnerable communities. That's a very basic thesis. That's a very basic reason for wanting to be a doctor. There's nothing really that spectacular about that. But this person, I'll show you, without revealing who they are, we'll show you the interviews that these people got. It worked. So then we have a story about, we have a transition that pulls from the intro. Building trust doesn't happen immediately, and then we have a story about her time being a welcome what is it called? An orientation leader in college. And then every paragraph ends with a tie back to the future. As a physician, I will continue practicing to be aware of how my patients respond to my care and adapt my approach to provide personalized, empathetic care. This is a reflection of what she did well in the story. Next paragraph, we have a story about something. I don't know, can't remember. A person who was afraid. As a physician, I want to use the valuable time that I have with patients to use tools like narrative medicine to form connections and empower them to process their emotional. So these are very specific about how she wants to practice medicine. We'll look at this one. So we have a story, and then we have as a physician. You'll notice that's very common in my writing. I hope to hone my skills in trauma-informed care and take the time to understand patient circumstances so that I can factor their physical and mental needs into consideration. I hope to continue to partner with my future patients as a physician by prioritizing their autonomy. This informed and prompted me to realize the importance of treating every patient with dignity and respect. Last one, and then we'll talk more. I want to take the same approach with each patient, assessing their lived experiences, adapting my treatment. And I want to engage in city or statewide conversations and work to create policy addressing systemic issues such as unsafe housing. So what are you seeing here? What are you noticing with this pattern?
It's showing and telling. It
Yep.
provides clear examples of what they've already done and builds on that for what they're going to do in the future.
Yep. So it's past and future, past and future. It's always past and future because our past informs who we are today. Our past informs what we want to do. Don't think I've ever met a person where their past was not somehow tied to what they want to do. So this is a competency-based approach because this is what they bring to the table. So it's what you want to do based on what you've done in your past. So you all need to think about in your stories, before you start writing your story, sometimes you write a story and we discover what this is, the pink part. Sometimes you know what this is and you need a story to tell it. And there's not a better or worse way to do that. There are two ways you can do it, right? If you are very clear about what you want to say, then you brainstorm stories to support that. If you have a lot of good stories and you're not clear yet how they tie together, then tell your stories and we'll find a way to tie them together. I don't care how we do it. One of those two ways is going to happen though. Either way, you're going to tell stories. Stories are really important, not because the stories themselves are important. The stories are a tool to get us to a point. The point is that you bring something to the table. It's something about you, what you want to do. So these are conceptual paragraphs. These are not just, you'll notice none of these are, this reaffirm my desire to be a doctor. If you go back and you look through these writings, you are not going to find the word passion or desire in any of this writing because passion and desire are emotions And when you're trying to become a like you're going for a doctoral level education, this should be a very intelligent and rational decision. This is not passion and desire, right? This is like, I want to do this because I've thought a lot about this and I've tested my theories and I've tried and I've worked in the experience, I've worked in these places. I know for a fact this is what I want to do. Some people can get away with writing about passion and desire, and they probably get into med school somewhere, but I am going to cringe if I see you writing about passion and desire. So I'm just being honest about that. Sorry. So let's look at what some of these people have done and how it worked out for them. So the first person that we read was the hospital story. That person, when she got to me, it was her 4th time applying to med school. First 3 times she applied, she had 0 interviews. The 3rd time or 4th time she applied with me, she had this many interviews using that personal statement. And she is at Tulane right now. So, yeah, you're not going to convince me that it doesn't work. And then the second person that we read, the short one, had the short intro. So what I wanted to tell you about that intro was that person, that intro was very different than the first and the third. Would you agree? Not very different, but it was kind of different, right? I thought so too. So the first and third is a little bit more of like my influence. It was very like descriptive. She had a moment of panic and she freaked out and she decided she wasn't going to write like that, and so she cut a lot of that down. It didn't really hurt her. Like she still did well. Like this is her. But I was sad when she took the original writing and butchered it because she let someone read it who told her it was terrible, and she changed it completely. What she submitted was not what so we worked on it. I thought it was great. She showed it to someone. They told her it was terrible. She changed it completely. I cried, and then she took it back to what it is today. But if I wouldn't have cried, I'm not sure that she would have changed it back. So, with what she has, this is what she got for interviews. So not bad. I'm not complaining. And then the third one, who was my personal favorite, this is where she is. So look at the stats there. And look at the schools. I'm personally super thrilled about that. So again, I am not going to just continue beating this over your heads that this method works, but if you if you'll work with me and trust me and do it this way, I have a lot of faith that it's going to work out okay for you. I am a big fan of myself these days. So it took a long time to get to that point. For years I was, it's very scary when people trust you with their med school application because, you're always like, oh my gosh, what if I'm wrong? What if this year I screwed everybody up and nobody gets into med school? And, it's really scary when people put all their trust in you. And for years I felt that way. I was like, oh, every year I'd be like, oh my gosh, I messed up. I did this wrong this year. It's all going to mess up. And then 3 years ago, I finally just started looking at it. I'm like, this is not a coincidence, right? This is not a coincidence that almost everybody I work with is getting into med school. I have to trust myself and I have to believe that what I'm doing is working. And once I kind of leaned into that, it's become actually much more fun. So I would just ask you all to trust me as we go into this cycle because it's going to be a lot of fun. I love seeing the output. I love seeing the effects of all of this on you all because it's really scary at the beginning and you don't know how it's going to turn out. And it's not always perfect. Like sometimes it doesn't work out perfectly the way we want it to. Sometimes people do have to reapply. Sometimes people don't get into their dream school. Sometimes people don't get interviews till after January. Like there are some negative things that happen too. But I have a lot of faith. I'm like that toxic positive person, that's like, it's gonna work out, it's gonna work out. Because honestly, in this process, like, what's the alternative? To just obsess about how it's not going to work out? If you do that, then you're gonna have an entire year and a half of misery. And this time is going to pass either way, right? Like you decided to apply to med school and this is going to be a year and a half. We can either be really miserable and sad and stressed out and depressed for a year and a half, or we can just be like, it is what it is. We're going to have fun with it. we're going to do our best. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to have faith. We're going to be positive, because I'd much rather spend a year and a half being positive with you than being depressed with you. So it's okay if you're depressed sometimes. I'll try to pull you out of it, but like, I'm not going to go there. Because I can't. I have learned to manage myself amongst all of you anxious people for years. There is a reason I have I'll show you this. It's kind of a joke, but not really. I have a tattoo that says breathe, because I work with pre-meds. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but not really. So I have learned to manage my own, because I'm an empathetic person, I tend to absorb people's feelings. And I've learned to manage myself in that way, working around all of you. So I will try my best to be really positive, to try to get you also to be a little bit more positive, because I know it's so stressful. I know it's scary, and I know all of that. But I'm going to choose to not focus on that. Okay. All right. But that doesn't mean you can't vent to me. You can tell me how bad it is. I'll listen to you. And I'll try to be positive. All right. Any questions for me, my friends?
I did have one general question. I heard from the school that I did my prereqs at, that more programs are going away from committee letters. Is that true? And how have you noticed like the change in how that affects an application?
Committee letters have been such a hot topic in the advising world for at least a decade. All the conferences I go to, it's almost always like a very heated debate. So the general thing is like most med schools don't care about your letters of rec. They don't care whether it's committee, they don't care if it's individual. They honestly don't read them that closely. They scrutinize, like they don't sit there and like scrutinize your letters. They're just skimming them. You spend a ton of time getting these letters, and it's probably the smallest portion of your application. They just make sure that nobody says like you have an interesting personality or anything like that. As long as there's no red flags in your letters, that's fine. So if your school's moving away from a committee letter, it doesn't matter. How many of you don't have a committee letter at your school? I'm just curious. Yeah.
We don't know. UMD doesn't.
Who doesn't?
The university decided this year to switch.
Yeah. So I've primarily in the past worked with California applicants who don't have committee letters because the schools are so big.
Mhm.
So it has not affected. Most of those people on that list that you saw didn't have committee letters.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Does it matter if you finish prereqs at community college, even if a 4 year is near where you live? If you're just finishing a couple, it's not a big deal. You wouldn't want to do the bulk of them at a community college after you've already finished a 4 year degree, though. We can talk about that. If any of you can come to the applicant support meeting tomorrow, those are great questions we could talk about at that meeting as well. We have more time. I can kind of dive deeper in if you have more specific questions. That meeting is free and open to anybody. So you can come anytime, you can stay as long as you want or as little. But that's a great place to bring all these kinds of random questions. It's at 8 p.m. Central, so same time as this. And the link is I posted it in your group a couple of weeks ago. It's also on my blog. It's the Tuesday night applicant support group. I will do that year round, almost every Tuesday. I will be there. And it's where we're gonna learn a lot of stuff over the year.
What are some things that you think, like when it comes to the whole like interpersonal statement stating what you want to do as a physician, I've also heard that like you should avoid saying stuff that like makes you seem like you already know what it is to be a physician because you're not. Like what are some things that you think should be avoided to not fall into that trap?
I don't think you should know. I don't think you should say you know what it means to be a physician. That'd be one of them. Um, I mean, I can't really think of an example of like what you shouldn't say. Like, can you provide me with an example?
Like when people say that um like I would want to do like when it comes to specialties like you're talking about, obviously
Mhm.
if you kind of know what you want to do to like hint towards it, but like I don't know. I've like most of the sources that I've been reading before I met you, like they always said that don't say like this is what I want to do, not this is what I want to do as a physician, but like if like I have my whole life planned out as a physician because you're supposed to figure that out in med school, just like you said. So I don't know if that's like changed now or something like that.
Well, a lot of it changed after the steps turned to pass no pass, because now they're putting less emphasis on the board scores and they're putting more emphasis on what you've accomplished in med school. So the minute you get to med school, you have to start doing things that relate to the field that you want to enter. So the faster you know what specialty you want to go into once you get to med school, the more you can do in that field and the more competitive you're going to be. So if you know you want to go into surgery from day one, you're more likely to get into surgery because you've done research in surgery for 4 years, you've shadowed surgeons, you've done everything in surgery for 4 years. If you don't discover that till your 3rd year, you're 2 years behind the person who knew from day one. So the med schools know that. So I'm never going to let you say, I want to be a surgeon in your personal statement. But I don't know. So yeah, if you say you want to go into community health, perfectly fine. If you say you want to go into family medicine, love it. Say it. Even pediatrics, nobody cares. Because those are not super uber competitive fields. Like you can get into those no problem. Even ED, honestly. But you're not going to say, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. You're not going to say, I want to go into derm. Right? You let that work itself out once you get there. So it kind of just depends on who you are and what you want to say. You could say, I want to go into, you want to use evidence-based innovation or innovative practices. You can say you want to integrate technology into your practice. You can say you want to use the latest and greatest, whatever to heal people, as long as you have something to back that up. But yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page there. I agree with the Reddit people that you shouldn't say what you want to do, but not 100%. I'm sure there are some nuggets of truth in Reddit, but I'll never know because I'm not going there to read it. You guys have to tell me what it says. Okay. So I'm going to try to end on time every week, but I never will. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or come tomorrow night. I'm happy to answer all your questions tomorrow night. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening, and I will see you all soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, goodbye.